There are forests that grow on maps. And there are forests that grow in memory. This story is not about getting lost, it is about being allowed in. In northern Thailand, there is a forest no one names, no one marks, and no one enters after sunset. Not because it is empty, but because something inside it is still counting. This is the story of the forest god's punishment. Chapter 1. The Forest Without a Name. In the northern reaches of Thailand, near the quiet borderlands of Nan Province, there exists a forest that does not appear on any official map. It is absent from guidebooks, satellite images, and government records. Even locals avoid marking it with symbols or names. When asked about it, they lower their voices, avert their eyes, and reply with the same sentence, repeated across generations. That forest has no name. Names give things permission to exist. The forest begins where a dirt road abruptly ends, as if the land itself refuses to continue. The soil darkens there, thick and damp, holding the footprints of those who hesitate but erasing the steps of those who proceed. Towering trees lean inward, their roots twisting above ground like exposed veins. The canopy is so dense that sunlight barely reaches the forest floor. Even at noon, inside, time feels distorted, minutes stretch unnaturally long, while hours vanish without warning. During the day, the forest appears unnervingly still. No birds sing, no insects hum. The silence is not peaceful, it is watchful. Villagers say the forest is awake even when it seems asleep, listening through bark and soil, counting breaths. At night, however, the forest changes. The wind does not pass through it, it circulates within, carrying sounds that do not belong to animals or weather. Leaves rustle without movement, branches creak as though adjusting their posture. Some claim the forest breathes after sunset, exhaling a cold, damp air that smells faintly of rot, iron, and old incense. No one from the nearby villages enters the forest after dusk. This rule is not written, not enforced by law or signposts. It exists deeper than tradition, embedded in fear. Children are taught it before they learn prayers. Hunters abandon prey if it runs toward the forest. Even monks walking alms routes will stop at its edge, turn around, and accept hunger rather than step inside. The reason is not wild animals. It is said that something ancient resides there, older than temples, older than language. The villagers call it the forest spirit, though they admit the word spirit is insufficient. It is not a ghost, nor a god in the human sense. It does not wander. It does not hunt. It waits. Those who once entered the forest and never returned were not called missing. The villagers use a different phrase. They were taken back. Because according to the old stories, the forest does not belong to the land. The land belongs to the forest. And the forest god still remembers every debt that has never been paid. Chapter 2. The Warning of the Village Elder. The oldest man in the village was named Prosert. Though few people spoke his name aloud, they referred to him simply as the elder, as if calling him anything more specific might invite attention from something unseen. Prosert was over 80 years old, yet his body looked older than time itself. One of his eyes was clouded white, sightless and unmoving. One of his ears was half collapsed, twisted inward like melted wax. Children whispered that the forest had taken those parts of him as payment, and spared the rest only because it had not yet decided what to do with him. When the outsiders arrived from Bangkok with cameras, drones, and laughter that cut too sharply through the quiet village air, Prosert watched them from the shade of a tamarind tree. He did not approach. He waited. The crew spoke excitedly about legends, viral footage, and proving that rural superstitions were nothing more than fear passed down through ignorance. They wanted to film the forest, the one without a name. They said it would be quick. Just one night, just one walk inside. When Prosert finally stood, the village fell silent. He walked toward them slowly, dragging one foot as if the earth itself resisted letting him move closer to the forest. When he spoke, his voice was dry, brittle, yet heavy with something deeper than age. "Do not enter that forest after sunset," he said. The crew exchanged glances. Someone smiled politely. "We've heard the stories," one of them replied. "That's exactly why we're here." Prosert shook his head. "You have heard stories. You have not heard warnings." He leaned closer, his good eye fixed on them, unblinking. "The forest does not kill people quickly," He continued, "It lets them walk. It lets them breathe. It lets them hope. And when they beg to die, only then does it listen." No one laughed this time. One of the crew asked what lived inside the forest. A tiger? A curse? A spirit? Prossert's lips trembled. "What lives there," he said, "is not something that hunts. It is something that remembers." He turned his back on them without waiting for a response. That night, as the outsiders prepared their equipment, the villagers closed their doors earlier than usual. Windows were barred, candles were lit, old prayers, older than Buddhism, were whispered under breath. Prossert sat alone in his house, staring at the forest line in the distance. He knew the sound that would come after sunset. The sound that meant the forest had been disturbed. And he knew, with a certainty that hollowed his chest, that by morning, the forest would have begun collecting what it was owed.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 3. Those who stepped into the forest. There were 5 of them. They arrived before noon, when the sky was still bright and forgiving, convinced that daylight would protect them from whatever the villagers feared. Their vehicle stopped at the end of the dirt road, right where the forest began, an abrupt, unnatural boundary, as though the land itself had been cut short. Kawin, the leader, stepped out first. He was confident, charismatic, the kind of man who spoke easily in front of a camera and believed deeply in his own voice. This was his project, another episode meant to blur the line between myth and reality, to turn fear into entertainment. Behind him came May, the camera woman, careful and observant. She adjusted the strap of her camera with practiced hands, though she could not explain the faint tightness in her chest when she looked at the trees. The forest seemed closer than it should have been, as if it had leaned forward when no one was watching. Anon, the survival expert, checked their gear and scoffed at the warnings they had been given. He had trained in jungles harsher than this, places where danger had teeth and claws. Whatever frightened the villagers, he assumed, would prove less impressive in daylight. Prisha, the driver, stayed quiet. He smoked constantly, flicking ash onto the ground near the forest's edge, never quite stepping closer than necessary. His eyes kept drifting toward the shadows between the trees, lingering a second too long. Last was Nok, the editor. She carried a small red cloth charm tied around her wrist, bought hastily from a roadside stall. She joked about protection and superstition, but her laughter sounded thin, as though she did not believe herself. Before entering, they tied similar red cloths around their wrists, mocking tradition by imitating it. None of them knew that true protective charms were never worn openly in that forest. To do so was considered an invitation. The moment they crossed the tree line, the air changed. It grew heavier, damp, pressing against their skin like unseen hands. The sounds of the village disappeared instantly, swallowed whole. Even their footsteps seemed muted, as if the forest absorbed noise the way soil absorbed rain. Kawin spoke into the camera, introducing the episode. His voice sounded wrong, flattened, distant, as though spoken through layers of cloth. May frowned, checking the audio levels. Everything was recording perfectly. The distortion was not technical. They walked deeper. The light dimmed far too quickly. Sunlight fractured through the canopy in uneven patches, never illuminating the path ahead, only the ground beneath their feet. As if the forest allowed them to see where they had stepped, but not where they were going. After 20 minutes, Anon checked the GPS. No signal. Prisha suggested turning back, just to recalibrate. They retraced their steps for several minutes, then stopped. The path behind them was gone. Not blocked, not overgrown. Gone. Where the trail had been, there was only untouched earth, smooth and undisturbed, as though no one had ever walked there at all. For the first time since arriving, no one spoke. Somewhere deep within the forest, something shifted. Not a sound, but a presence. And though none of them said it aloud, each of them felt the same realization settle coldly in their gut. They had not entered the forest. The forest had accepted them. Chapter 4. When the forest sealed the exit. At first, they told themselves it was a mistake. Paths could be confusing, vegetation could change, memory could fail under stress. Anon crouched down, running his fingers over the soil where the trail should have been. There were no footprints, not even their own. The The ground was smooth, damp, and unmarked, as if it had been carefully brushed clean. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. Kawin tried to laugh it off for the camera, but the sound caught in his throat. "Okay," he said, forcing cheer into his voice. "So the forest plays tricks. That's good content. We'll find another way out." They chose a direction at random and walked. The forest responded. The trees grew closer together, their trunks subtly shifting positions when no one was looking directly at them. Branches bent inward, narrowing the space between paths until walking required squeezing sideways. Vines snagged at clothing, tightening like fingers before loosening again, as if testing resistance. May kept filming, though her hands had begun to shake. Through the camera lens, the forest looked different, darker, deeper, its shadows layered in ways her eyes could not fully process. When she lowered the camera, she felt disoriented, as if the world outside the frame was slightly out of alignment. After what felt like an hour, they stopped. They were back where they had started. The same twisted fig tree, the same exposed roots shaped like a broken jaw, the same faint mark Nock had scratched into the bark when they first entered. "No," Nock whispered, "we didn't walk in a circle." They tried again, and again. Each time, the forest folded their path inward, quietly returning them to the same place. It did not rush, it did not threaten, it simply refused to let them leave. The air grew thicker as afternoon faded into evening. The temperature dropped sharply, raising goosebumps along their arms. Somewhere above them, the canopy shifted, blocking what little light remained. The sun disappeared without a sunset, as though it had been turned off. Preach's breathing grew uneven. He swore he could hear footsteps behind them, slow, heavy, deliberately out of sync with their own. When he turned around, there was nothing. But the feeling remained. Kawin checked his phone. No signal, no time displayed. The battery indicator flickered, then vanished entirely. That was when the smell appeared. Not rot, not decay. Incense. Old, burned down to the core incense. The kind used in forgotten shrines and funerals where no one came to mourn. Anand swallowed hard. "We should set up camp," he said. "Wait until morning." No one argued. As they worked, Nock noticed something she had not seen before: shallow grooves in the soil, running in a wide circle around their chosen campsite. They were old, half filled with leaves, but unmistakably intentional. A boundary. As night fully settled, the forest grew unnaturally quiet again. Then, from somewhere deep underground, came a sound that made every one of them freeze. A low, hollow thump. Then another. Slow, rhythmic, like a drum being struck beneath the earth. With each beat, the ground trembled faintly, just enough to feel, not enough to see. An ancient signal. A heartbeat that did not belong to any living thing. The forest had finished sealing the exit. Now, it was announcing that the ritual had begun.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 5. The Ruined Shrine. Morning came without light. They woke to a gray stillness. The forest wrapped in a dim haze that made it impossible to tell whether the sun had risen or not. The air was damp, clinging to their skin like a thin film. No dew, no birds. Even the drumming from the night before had faded, leaving behind an uneasy silence that felt heavier than sound. Anand was the first to notice the structure. It stood several meters beyond their campsite, partially hidden behind a cluster of trees that none of them remembered seeing the night before. The shrine was small, no larger than a roadside spirit house, built from dark, splintering wood and stone blackened by age. Moss crept along its base like a slow infection. Red and yellow cloth strips, once offerings, hung in tatters, moving slightly though there was no wind. "This wasn't here yesterday," May said quietly. No one argued. As they approached, the smell of old incense grew stronger, mixed with something metallic and sour. Nock stopped just short of the shrine, her hand instinctively gripping the red charm on her wrist. Her fingers trembled. Inside the shrine stood a statue. It was not shaped like any Buddha or spirit they recognized. The figure was tall and narrow, carved from a single piece of wood, its surface cracked with age. It resembled a man only vaguely. The lower half merged into twisted roots, while the upper body was hunched forward unnaturally. Its face had no eyes. Where the eyes should have been, there were smooth, hollow depressions, as if they had never existed, or had been deliberately removed. Ancient Thai script was carved into the stone behind it, worn but still legible in places. Anand traced the markings with his finger, translating slowly. What is taken, will be taken back. What is seen, will see in return. Kawin raised his camera. This is incredible, he whispered, awe overriding fear. This is proof. This. Don't. Prossert's voice echoed suddenly in May's mind. She didn't realize she had stepped forward until her camera lens was only inches from the statue's face. Through the viewfinder, the hollow sockets seemed deeper, darker, almost endless. The longer she looked, the more she felt a strange pressure behind her own eyes, as if something inside her skull was being gently pressed outward. She blinked. For a fraction of a second, the statue's face filled the frame. And then, she was no longer sure she was looking at it alone. That night, after they returned to camp, May lay awake staring into the darkness. The others slept fitfully, murmuring, shifting, as if caught in half-remembered dreams. Then she heard it. A whisper. Soft, close. Her name, spoken clearly, slowly, with a familiarity that made her chest tighten. May. She squeezed her eyes shut, her heart pounding. When she opened them again, the forest was silent. But from the direction of the shrine, she could have sworn she saw something standing, perfectly still, watching the campsite without eyes. And waiting. Chapter 6. The drumming beneath the soil. The drumming returned shortly after midnight. At first, it was so faint that Kawin thought he was dreaming, a distant pressure rather than a sound. Like blood rushing through the ears. But then it came again, deeper, clearer, a single hollow thump, rising from beneath the ground. May sat up abruptly, her breath caught in her throat. The rhythm was slow and deliberate, separated by long pauses, as though whatever struck the drum was listening between each beat. The earth beneath them trembled slightly, just enough to be felt through bone and muscle. Not an earthquake, not an animal. A signal. Anand reached for his watch. The screen was blank, though he was certain it had worked earlier. He pressed his fingers into the soil, his face tightening. It's coming from below us, he whispered. The drumming continued. With every beat, the air seemed to compress, pressing inward against their chests. Nok clutched her head, rocking slightly, her lips moving soundlessly. Kawin tried to speak, but his words came out disjointed, swallowed by the trees. Then Anand gagged. He fell to his knees, retching violently. At first, only bile came up, then something darker, thicker. May shone a flashlight toward him, and the beam caught on what lay in the dirt. Soil. Not mud, not debris. Packed earth, clotted with strands of black hair. Anand screamed, clawing at his mouth as if something inside him was trying to crawl back down his throat. His eyes rolled back, veins standing out against his skin. The drumming quickened slightly, responding. Nok began to cry. She said she could hear chanting beneath the beats, voices layered too closely together. Speaking in a language she did not understand but somehow recognized. Old prayers, broken promises, names repeated again and again, pressed into the rhythm like scars. May tried to record the sound. When she played it back through her headphones, there was no drumming. Only breathing. Slow, patient. As if someone, or something, was listening directly into the microphone. The ground shifted. Not enough to open, not enough to crack, but enough to suggest depth. Kawin felt a sudden certainty wash over him. Cold and absolute. The forest was not standing on solid ground. It was standing on layers. Layer upon layer of offerings, bones, and things that had once begged. The drumming stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Silence crashed down around them, thick and oppressive. No one moved, no one dared to speak. In the distance, a tree creaked, low and heavy, like a joint settling into place. Anand lay curled on the ground, shaking, streaked with dirt and blood. His eyes were open now, staring at nothing. I didn't take it, he whispered hoarsely. I didn't know. No one asked him what he meant. They all felt it. The forest was no longer testing them. It was remembering. And it had just begun to decide who would pay first.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 7. The One Who Vanished Without a Trace. Morning did not bring relief. The gray haze still clung to the forest, as if night had simply loosened its grip rather than released them. Anon remained weak, barely able to stand. His skin was pale, almost ashen, and his eyes avoided the ground beneath their feet, as though he feared what might answer if he looked too closely. No one spoke about what he had vomited. They packed their things in silence, every movement cautious, deliberate. Even the sound of fabric brushing against fabric felt too loud. Prisha volunteered to walk a short distance away from camp to relieve himself. He forced a grin, waving dismissively. "I'll stay close," he said. "I'm not stupid." He took his flashlight and stepped toward the trees, stopping just beyond the circle of their camp. They could still see him, his outline framed by trunks and shadow. At least, they thought they could. The forest swallowed sound first. Preach's footsteps faded after only a few steps, though he was still clearly visible. Then the light from his flashlight flickered once, twice, and vanished entirely. "Prisha?" Kawin called. No answer. A few seconds passed. Then came a sound, not a scream, not quite a shout. It was cut short, as if something had closed around his voice before it could escape. They ran. The place where Prisha had stood was empty. No footprints, no disturbed leaves. His flashlight lay on the ground, still warm, its beam pointed uselessly at the base of a tree. Nearby, one of his sandals rested on its side, the strap torn clean through. There was no blood, but the soil showed long, shallow marks, pressed into the earth as though something heavy had been dragged away, slowly, deliberately, into the deeper forest. Nak collapsed to her knees, sobbing. Kawin shouted Preach's name again and again until his voice broke. Anon stood frozen, staring at the drag marks with an expression of dawning horror. "This isn't killing," he said finally. "It's collecting." They followed the marks only a few meters before the forest erased them completely. The ground smoothed itself, leaves settling back into place as if guided by invisible hands. That was when May noticed something else. The trees ahead were closer together than before, their trunks subtly curved inward, and carved into the bark, fresh, shallow, unmistakable, was a symbol none of them remembered making. A crude circle. A boundary. Behind them, a branch snapped. They turned, hearts racing. Nothing stood there. But the forest felt fuller now, as if something that had been missing had finally been put back where it belonged. Somewhere far away, beneath layers of soil and roots, the drumming began again, slower this time. Satisfied. Chapter 8. The face within the tree. They did not sleep. No one suggested it, no one closed their eyes. Night returned without warning, thick and absolute, as though the forest had folded darkness directly over them. The fire anon managed to start burned low and uneven, its flames bending strangely, never rising straight. Preach's name hung in the air, unspoken but present. Every snapped twig, every subtle shift of leaves carried the echo of his absence. Just before dawn, or what they assumed was dawn, Kawin saw the tree. It stood a short distance from their camp, a massive trunk with bark darker than the others, its surface unusually smooth. He was certain it had not been there before, or perhaps it had always been there, and the forest had only now allowed him to notice it. "May," he whispered, "point the camera there." May hesitated, then lifted the lens. At first, there was nothing unusual, just bark, just shadow, but as the light shifted, the surface of the tree seemed to ripple, as though something beneath it was moving closer to the skin. Then the bark bulged outward. Slowly, deliberately, a human face emerged. Not carved, not painted. Pressed from within. The features were distorted, stretched unnaturally, but unmistakable. The curve of the nose, the slack mouth, the wide, unblinking eyes. It was Prisha. His lips trembled, opening and closing soundlessly at first. Then, with a wet cracking noise, the bark around his mouth split just enough to let sound escape. "Don't film," the face whispered. The tree breathed. Its trunk expanded and contracted subtly, each motion accompanied by a low creak, like wood straining against bone. Sap leaked from the corners of the eyes, thick and dark, streaking down like tears. Nock screamed and fell backward. Anon retched again, though there was nothing left in his stomach. Kawin stood frozen, his camera forgotten, his mind struggling to reconcile what he was seeing. Preach's eyes shifted, slowly, painfully, until they locked onto Kawin. "I didn't leave," the face said. "I'm still here." The bark began to close. The features softened, sinking back into the trunk as if being pulled away from the surface. The mouth moved one last time. "It's inside you now." Then the tree was just a tree again. No cracks, no face, no sign that anything had changed. Except for the smell. Fresh sap and something older, something human. May checked the footage with shaking hands. The camera had captured everything. Except the face. On the screen, there was only a tree. Ordinary, lifeless. But beneath the audio track, faint and almost impossible to hear, was a second sound layered beneath their breathing. A voice. Whispering names. One fewer than before. The forest had returned Prisha. Not as a man, but as a warning. And it was no longer pretending to be subtle.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 9. The Elder's Confession. They found the recording by accident. It was Nock who noticed the small wooden box beneath the ruined shrine. Half buried in soil and roots, as though the forest had tried, and failed, to swallow it completely. Inside were brittle cassette tapes. Their labels faded, the writing barely legible. One name appeared again and again. Prossert. Anon's hands shook as he loaded one of the tapes into the old player they had salvaged from their gear. The machine whined, then clicked. Static filled the air, followed by the unmistakable sound of heavy breathing. Then a voice. Younger than the elder they had met. Stronger, but already afraid. "This is my confession," Prossert said. "If anyone hears this, then the forest has not forgiven us." The tape crackled as he spoke. He described the village as it once was, poor, starving, desperate. The land had been cursed by drought. Crops failed, children died. The forest, untouched and vast, stood just beyond their fields. "They warned us," Prossert continued. "The monks, the old women, the spirits. But hunger is louder than fear. They cut into the forest. One tree, then another. The ground bled sap so dark it looked like rot. Animals vanished. The forest grew quiet in a way that felt like being watched. Then the accidents began. People went missing. Livestock were found fused into tree trunks. Paths vanished. Night brought drumming from underground. So the village sought forgiveness. They built the shrine. And they made an offering." Prossert's voice broke. It had to be something pure. He whispered, something that belonged to the village. A child. Chosen by lot, no name spoken aloud on the tape. Only crying in the background, faint, distant, and then abruptly silenced. "We believed it would end there," Prossert said. "We were wrong." The forest god accepted the offering. But it did not absolve the debt. It changed its terms. "Now," Prossert said, his voice hollow, "the forest does not take what is given. It takes what is owed." The tape ended with a final warning. "If outsiders enter, if they disturb what sleeps, the forest will balance itself again. It always does." The player clicked off. Silence pressed in around them. Nock was crying quietly. Kawin stared at the ground, unable to lift his eyes. Anon felt something cold settle in his chest as realization took hold. They were not being punished for what they had done. They were payment. Outside the shrine, the forest shifted. Roots moved beneath the soil, slow and deliberate. The confession had not been hidden to protect the truth. It had been preserved. So the forest could decide who would hear it next. And who would never leave after listening. Chapter 10. The God does not kill, it replaces. Something changed after they heard the confession. It was subtle at first. The way a fever begins, not with pain, but with wrongness. The forest felt closer. Its presence no longer confined to the trees and soil, but seeping inward, settling beneath skin. Nock was the first to change. She stopped crying. At some point during the afternoon, her sobs faded into silence. And when Kawin turned to check on her, She was standing at the edge of the clearing, perfectly still. Her posture was rigid, unnatural, as if she had forgotten how to rest. "Knock," he called. She did not respond. Her eyes were open, wide and unblinking, fixed on the forest beyond the trees. Not on any single point, on everything. When she finally turned her head, the movement was slow, delayed, like a poorly synchronized reflection. "I hear it," she said calmly. "Hear what?" May asked, her voice trembling. "The counting," Knock replied. "The forest is counting." She spoke without fear, without emotion. Her voice was flatter than before, stripped of the hesitation that made it human. Anon checked her pupils. They reacted sluggishly to light. Her skin felt cold despite the humid air. "She needs rest," he said, though he didn't believe it. That night, Knock did not sleep. She sat cross-legged near the remnants of the shrine, humming softly. The tune was unfamiliar, built on a rhythm that echoed the underground drumming. Every so often, she pressed her palm to the soil, as if listening through it. May tried to record her. On the footage, Knock was not there. The camera showed only an empty clearing, leaves shifting gently, though May could see Knock clearly with her own eyes. When she moved closer, the image flickered violently, then cut to static. "Stop filming," Knock said without turning around. May lowered the camera immediately. Sometime before dawn, Knock stood and walked into the forest. She did not announce it. She did not hesitate. She stepped between the trees as if they had parted for her. Kawin ran after her, grabbing her arm. The skin beneath his fingers felt wrong, too tight, stretched thin over something hard. Knock looked at him. For the first time since entering the forest, she smiled. "It needs someone to stay," she said, "someone who remembers." Behind her, the trees creaked, bending inward slightly, as if in recognition. Anon pulled Kawin back. "Let her go," he whispered urgently. "It's already chosen." Knock took another step forward. The forest swallowed her without sound. No scream, no struggle. Just acceptance. Moments later, the drumming stopped. For the first time since entering the forest, the silence that followed did not feel hostile. It felt complete. The forest god had not taken Knock. It had installed her. And now, it was ready to continue.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 11. The Night Without Mirrors. After Knock disappeared, the forest grew disturbingly calm. Not peaceful, never peaceful, but balanced. Like a scale that had finally stopped trembling. Kawin, May, and Anon remained in the clearing, unwilling to move, afraid that any step might draw attention back to them. None of them said Knock's name again, saying it felt dangerous, as if names could summon what had already chosen not to return. As night fell, something strange happened to the shadows. They no longer followed the light. The fire cast flickering flames, but the shadows around them lagged behind, moving a fraction of a second too late, as if unsure what shape to take. When May raised her hand, she saw her shadow lift its fingers after she had already lowered them. She stopped using the camera. There was no point anymore. Anon discovered the first mirror by accident, a small, cracked piece of polished metal embedded in the shrine stone. He wiped it clean and froze. The reflection did not match. His face looked thinner, older, his eyes sat too deep in their sockets, and something about his expression felt borrowed, like a mask worn by someone unfamiliar with human muscles. Kawin leaned over his shoulder. "What's wrong?" he asked. Anon turned the mirror toward him. Kawin recoiled. His reflection blinked out of sync. Just once, but it was enough. They smashed the mirror immediately, grinding the fragments into the dirt. But that night, reflective surfaces appeared everywhere, puddles that had not been there before, leaves slick with sap, gleaming like glass. Even May's camera lens reflected her face back at her, wrong, distorted, smiling faintly when she was not. Anon began speaking to himself in whispers, arguing under his breath in a language Kawin did not recognize. He insisted he was hearing replies from beneath the soil, corrections being offered gently, patiently. "You're standing wrong," Anon muttered at one point. "You don't belong in that shape." May woke to the sensation of fingers brushing her cheek. She opened her eyes to see her own face hovering inches above hers, reflected perfectly in a pool of dark water beside her sleeping mat. But the reflection did not copy her fear. It watched her with curiosity, studying. When she screamed, the pool rippled, and the face vanished. By morning, none of them trusted their senses. They avoided looking at one another too closely. Eye contact lingered too long, as if something behind their eyes might answer back. They began to understand the truth the elder had tried to warn them about. The forest was not changing the environment. It was editing them, removing excess, correcting flaws, preparing replacements. As the underground drumming returned, soft, almost affectionate, Kawin realized something that hollowed his chest. The forest god did not need mirrors anymore. It had learned their faces by heart. Chapter 12. The path that allows only one. The rain began without clouds. It fell straight down through the canopy, thick and warm, soaking the forest floor in minutes. The drops were heavy, leaving dark stains wherever they touched. And when Kawin wiped his face, his fingers came away slick and red. It was not blood, but it looked too much like it. As the rain continued, the forest shifted again. Trees groaned softly, their roots loosening their grip on the soil. The ground ahead of the clearing darkened, then slowly smoothed itself, forming a narrow strip of exposed earth. A path. It cut through the forest like a scar, unmistakable and deliberate, unlike every false trail before. This one did not loop or twist back on itself. It led away, straight, clear, and open. May fell to her knees in relief. Anand stared at the path with dread etched into every line of his face. "It's real," Kawin whispered. He felt it instinctively. The forest was not hiding this path. It was offering it. But offers from the forest were never gifts. Anand knelt at the edge of the trail, pressing his palm to the ground. His eyes closed, his breathing slowed. "It only leads out for one person," he said quietly. May shook her head. "You don't know that." "I do," Anand replied. "It's counting again. One set of footsteps, one heartbeat." The drumming beneath the soil resumed, slower than before, each beat spaced far apart. With every strike, the path pulsed faintly, as if responding. Kawin felt the weight of understanding settle over him. The forest was not choosing randomly. It was asking them to choose. May backed away, tears streaking down her face. "No," she whispered, "we can't." A memory surfaced in Kawin's mind, the elder's clouded eye, his twisted ear, a man allowed to leave, but never whole. Anand stood. "If I stay," he said, "it won't chase you." Kawin looked at him sharply. "You don't know that." Anand smiled weakly. "I know enough." The rain intensified, washing the ground clean everywhere except the path. The rest of the forest seemed to lean inward, listening. May grabbed Kawin's arm. "Please," she begged, "don't make me watch this." Anand stepped onto the path. The drumming paused. The forest held its breath. For a moment, Kawin thought Anand might be allowed to walk away freely. But then Anand stopped and turned back, his expression shifting, pain flickering across his features as if something deep inside him had been rearranged. He met Kawin's eyes. "Run," Anand said. Then he shoved Kawin forward with all his strength. Kawin stumbled, fell, and rolled onto the path. The ground beneath him hardened instantly, locking him in place for a heartbeat, just long enough to seal the decision. When Kawin looked back, the path behind him was already dissolving. Anand stood where the trail had been, surrounded by roots rising slowly from the soil, wrapping around his legs like waiting hands. He did not scream. The forest did not need screams anymore. It had what it wanted. And Kawin was running out of time.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 13. The One Who Returned. Kawin did not remember leaving the forest. There was no clear moment of escape, no final step across a boundary. No sense of crossing from one world into another. One moment he was running, lungs burning, the sound of the drumming pounding behind his ears. And the next he was collapsing onto hard asphalt beneath a pale morning sky. A truck driver found him at the edge of a rural highway. Miles from the nearest village, Kawin was barefoot, his clothes shredded, his skin streaked with mud and something darker. When the driver asked where he had come from, Kawin tried to answer. No sound came out. For days, he could not speak. Doctors in Bangkok called it shock, dehydration, acute psychological trauma. They noted the marks on his body, long, faint lines running vertically along his legs and back, like impressions left by roots pressed too tightly against skin. They faded, but not completely. Kawin returned to his apartment, surrounded by concrete, glass, and noise. The city should have been a relief. Instead, it felt thin, like a fragile layer stretched over something deeper. At night, he heard the drumming. Not loudly, not clearly. Just enough to feel it. The rhythm came from beneath the floor, from inside the walls, from his own chest. He tore up the floorboards searching for the source, only to find packed dirt beneath the concrete, dark and damp, smelling faintly of incense. Plants began to grow in impossible places. A small sapling pushed through a crack in his bathroom tiles. Roots spread beneath his bed, lifting it slightly off the ground. No matter how many times he removed them, they returned by morning, thicker than before. Kawin avoided mirrors. When he did catch his reflection, he noticed changes he could not explain. His posture was stiffer. His gaze lingered too long. Sometimes his reflection blinked just a fraction too late. He stopped sleeping. When he closed his eyes, he saw the forest, not as it had been, but as it was now. He felt its awareness stretch outward, following him, testing the distance. One night, while reviewing old footage out of habit more than intention, Kawin discovered something new. In the final recording, filmed accidentally as he fell onto the path, there was a figure standing far behind him among the trees. Anon. He did not look injured. He did not look afraid. His eyes were white, empty. And behind him, the forest bent inward, listening. The recording ended there. Kawin deleted the file. But deletion did not remove memory. The forest god had let him leave. Not as mercy, but as proof. Proof that the forest did not need to keep everyone inside to survive. It only needed one to remember. And to carry the sound of the drums into the world beyond the trees. Chapter 14. The New Guardian of the Forest. Anon did not die. Death would have been simple, clean, final. What happened to him was something else. Deep within the forest, where the roots grew so thick they strangled the earth itself, Anon stood motionless. Time passed around him without touching him. Days folded into nights. Seasons shifted overhead, unseen beneath the canopy. His body did not age. It did not heal. It did not decay. It adjusted. The roots that had wrapped around his legs no longer restrained him. They had fused. His feet were no longer feet, but extensions of the forest floor. Bone threaded with wood, veins braided into vines. When he tried to step forward, the ground moved with him. His eyes were the first to change. Sight became unnecessary. The forest showed him everything. He saw through bark and soil, through insects crawling beneath leaves, through the slow movement of bones buried decades ago. He felt footsteps long before they were taken. He felt fear before it had a shape. Sound followed. The drumming was no longer beneath him. It was within. Each beat synchronized with his pulse, until there was no difference between the rhythm of the forest and the rhythm of his heart. When the drums paused, his breath paused with them. Anon remembered who he had been. That was the cruelest part. The forest god did not erase memory. It preserved it, sharpened it, made it useful. Anon remembered his training, his confidence, his certainty that he understood the jungle. He remembered being wrong. Villagers who passed near the forest's edge sometimes saw him at dusk, a tall figure standing between the trees. Unmoving, they thought he was a trick of the light, a shadow, a tree shaped too much like a man. Children, however, refused to look. Animals avoided him instinctively. Anon could no longer leave the forest. But he did not need to. When outsiders approached, drawn by stories or curiosity or greed, the forest whispered to him first. He felt their intentions brush against his awareness like insects caught in webbing. Sometimes, he guided them away. Most times, he did not. His role was not to judge. It was to balance. Far away, In a quiet village, an old man with one blind eye and one twisted ear slept for the final time. When he died, the forest sighed, a long, deep exhale. The position was fully open now. Anon understood then. The forest god did not punish forever. It appointed. And somewhere beyond the trees, someone would eventually hear the drums, feel the pull, and step where they should not. When that happened, Anon would be there, waiting. Not as a man, but as the memory of what the forest does to those who believe it is empty.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 15. The forest is still watching. The forest does not expand. It does not need to. Maps around Nan province have remained unchanged for decades. Their clean lines and labeled roads suggesting a certainty that does not exist. Satellite images show only an unremarkable stretch of green, no darker patches. No gaps where something should not be. But people still disappear. A hunter who followed wounded prey too far at dusk. A monk who lingered after evening prayers. A group of young travelers chasing stories they believed were exaggerated. The villagers no longer search. They leave offerings at the edge of the trees, rice, incense, folded cloth, never stepping beyond the invisible line. They do not pray for mercy. They pray for balance. Sometimes, at night, the drumming can be heard again. Not loudly. Not clearly. It travels through soil, through roots, through memory. Those who hear it often dismiss it as imagination, a trick of fatigue or stress. But a few, very few, feel something deeper awaken in their chest. A pull. Kawin hears it every night. He has learned not to fight it. He lives quietly now, far from the forest, far from cameras. He does not speak of what happened. When asked, he changes the subject or leaves the room. Yet the rhythm follows him, in the hum of traffic, in the vibration of train platforms, in the slow, steady beat of his own heart. He dreams of trees growing through concrete, of roots cracking foundations, of a man standing between trunks, watching without eyes. Sometimes, Kawin wakes with dirt beneath his fingernails. Sometimes, he wakes standing. In the forest, Anon listens. He feels each footstep that approaches the boundary. He senses curiosity hardening into intent. He does not move unless necessary. The forest does not rush. It has learned patience from the earth itself. The shrine still stands, though no one remembers building it. The statue within has changed. Where once there were hollow sockets, there are now shallow impressions, suggestions of eyes. Not fully open. Not yet. The forest god is not angry. It is not cruel. It is exact. It remembers every tree cut without permission. Every offering made too late. Every boundary crossed with arrogance. And it remembers every face. The forest does not kill quickly. It does not need to. It replaces. It waits. And when the drumming begins beneath your feet, slow, deliberate, impossibly close, it is already too late to ask whether the stories were true. Because the forest never stopped watching. And it never will. If you are listening to this at night, pause for a moment. Listen carefully, not to the story, but to the ground beneath you. Because forests do not always stay where they are born. Some follow those who remember them. And if you ever hear a slow, hollow rhythm beneath your feet, do not run. The forest already knows your name.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.